When you hear the word Viking, what comes to mind? Brutal warriors, burning villages, longships crossing dark seas, perhaps even warriors wearing horned helmets. But much of what we imagine about the Vikings is wrong. The real Vikings were far more complicated and far more fascinating. They were farmers, traders, craftsmen, explorers, settlers, warriors, and sailors who transformed the medieval world. Their story began in Scandinavia, in the lands we know today as Norway, Denmark, and Sweden. For centuries, these communities lived in a harsh environment of mountains, forests, cold seas, and short growing seasons. Most Vikings were not raiders, they were ordinary people trying to survive. They farmed crops, raised animals, built houses, produced tools, traded goods, and raised families. Viking women could manage farms and households, produce textiles, and in some circumstances control property. Viking society also had laws and political assemblies. One of the most important was the Thing, where free people could gather to settle disputes and make decisions. But around the late 8th century, something changed. Viking ships began appearing far beyond Scandinavia. In the year 793, Viking raiders attacked the monastery of Lindisfarne on the northeastern coast of England. The attack shocked Christian Europe. The Vikings had arrived, and they would not disappear quickly. Their greatest advantage was the longship. These ships were light, fast, and remarkably versatile. They could cross open seas, but they could also travel into shallow rivers. That meant Viking crews could suddenly appear deep inside territories that had previously seemed protected. But the Vikings were not simply pirates, they were traders too. They exchanged furs, amber, metals, weapons, slaves, and other goods across enormous distances. Swedish Vikings traveled east through the rivers of Eastern Europe and reached the powerful Byzantine Empire. Some became members of the famous Varangian Guard, an elite force serving the Byzantine Emperor. Others settled in places such as Ireland, England, and parts of Eastern Europe. And Viking expansion went even farther. They settled Iceland, they reached Greenland. And around the year 1000, Norse explorers reached North America, centuries before Christopher Columbus. One of the most famous explorers associated with this journey was Leif Erikson. The Vikings called the new land Vinland. Archaeological discoveries at Lonzo Meadows in Newfoundland provide strong evidence that Norse people established a settlement there. But Viking life was not only about exploration and warfare. Their culture was rich and complex. They created beautiful jewelry, carved intricate designs into wood and metal, built impressive ships, and told stories about gods such as Odin and Thor. They also believed strongly in honor, reputation, family, and loyalty. And then there is one famous Viking image we need to correct: horned helmets. There is no good archaeological evidence that Viking warriors commonly wore horned helmets into battle. That image largely comes from much later artistic and popular culture. The real Viking warrior was usually equipped much more practically, with shields, spears, axes, swords, helmets, and protective clothing. But the Viking Age could not last forever. Europe was changing, kingdoms became stronger, Christianity spread throughout Scandinavia, political systems became more centralized, and Viking raids gradually became less successful. In 1066, one of the most symbolic moments of the Viking Age took place. The Norwegian king Harald Hardrada invaded England, but at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, his army was defeated by the English king Harold Godwinson. Harold was killed. For many historians, this battle represents one of the final great moments of the Viking Age. Yet the Vikings did not simply disappear. Their descendants remained. Their settlements became towns. Their trade routes connected distant regions. Their languages influenced the places where they settled, and their stories survived. The real Viking story is not simply a story about violence, it is a story about human ambition. People living in a difficult northern world learned to build extraordinary ships, cross dangerous oceans, establish distant settlements, create trading networks, and adapt to completely different cultures. They were farmers and warriors, traders and explorers, builders and storytellers. The Vikings were not the mythical monsters of popular movies. They were real people, and that makes their story even more remarkable. More than 1,000 years later, their voyages, discoveries, battles, beliefs, and settlements still shape how we understand the medieval world. The Viking Age ended, but the Viking legacy never truly disappeared. Even after the Viking Age came to an end, the influence of the Norse people did not fade away. Instead, it slowly transformed into something new. In many regions, Viking settlers became part of the local population. They adopted new languages, new religions, and new political systems. But they also left their mark behind. In England, Scotland, Ireland, and France, traces of Viking ancestry still remain in place: names, family names, and cultural traditions. In Normandy, Viking settlers became so integrated that they eventually formed one of the most powerful medieval duchies in Europe. From there, their descendants would go on to shape European history in new and unexpected ways. In Scandinavia itself, the old Viking kingdoms gradually evolved into the modern nations of Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. The longships disappeared from the seas, but the maritime spirit remained. Even today, these countries are deeply connected to the ocean, exploration, and trade. Echoes of their Viking past still visible in modern culture. Archaeology continues to reveal new secrets about the Viking world. Burial sites, ship remains, tools, weapons, and everyday objects help historians understand not just how Vikings fought, but how they lived, loved, worked, and dreamed. Each discovery adds another piece to the puzzle of their civilization. And perhaps the most important truth we have learned is this: the Vikings were not a single image or stereotype. They were a diverse and dynamic people who lived full human lives in a challenging world. They were shaped by their environment, but they also shaped history in return. Their journeys connected continents. Their trade routes linked cultures. Their stories survived in sagas, myths, and modern imagination. And even now, more than 1,000 years later, the Viking Age continues to inspire curiosity, research, and storytelling around the world. Because in the end, the story of the Vikings is not just about the past. It is about how ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when they are driven by survival, ambition, and the desire to explore the unknown. And that is why the Vikings are still remembered today, not as legends, but as real people who once sailed beyond the edge of their world.